Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Monday, August 15th, 2022. It's the anniversary of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Taliban fighters celebrating in the streets of Kabul. And there is heated debate in Washington over the fallout. U.S. House Republicans saying that the withdrawal was badly mishandled by President Biden, and the White House pushing back, saying that the president made the best of a bad situation that he inherited. We'll hear from the State Department, a few Republicans in Congress, and talk with Washington Examiner White House reporter Katherine Doyle. Iran denying it had anything to do with the violent attack on author Salman Rushdie on Friday, instead blaming him and his supporters for insulting Islam, bringing the attack on himself. China stepping up military exercises again around Taiwan as a second U.S. Congressional delegation in just a couple of weeks visits the self-governing island that China says is still its territory. And former President Donald Trump says the temperature has to be brought down and is offering to do whatever we can do to help after an increase in threats to federal law enforcement following the FBI's search of his home to retrieve classified documents. Reporting of Associated Press from Kabul, Afghanistan, the Taliban on Monday marked a year since they seized the Afghan capital, a rapid takeover that triggered a hasty escape of the nation's Western-backed leaders, sent the economy into a tailspin and fundamentally transformed the country. Bearded Taliban fighters, some hoisting rifles or the white banners of their movement, staged small victory parades on foot, bicycles, and motorcycles in the streets of the capital. One small group marched past the former U.S. Embassy chanting, "Long live Islam" and "Death to America." Back in Washington, some questions about the anniversary at today's State Department briefing with spokesman Ned Price.
Yeah, thank you very much. You mentioned the beginning of your speech about Afghanistan. It's really 1 year. It's a long time for Afghan women. Still Afghan women suffer. Still we are crying for this flag. And women protest on the street, Taliban shooting them. And the school is still closed. As you mentioned, that United States continue their humanitarian assistance. That's good, thank you. But as I told you the day before yesterday and yesterday, around the world, women protest because of women in Afghanistan. And Taliban answered them by shooting the gun. Number two, President Ghani was recently did an interview with CNN, and he totally blamed the United States for collapse of the regime. Do you have any comments about President Ghani? And he said Khalil Zada's a two faces, United States play game with me, and so many things. There is a short interview.
On your first question, there are a number of priorities, a number of enduring commitments we have to the people of Afghanistan. At the top of that list is to use every tool that we have appropriate to see to it that the Taliban lives up to the commitments that it has made publicly, that it has made privately, but most importantly, the commitments that the Taliban has made to its own people, to all of the Afghan people. And when we say all of the Afghan people, we mean all. We mean Afghanistan's women, its girls, its religious minorities, its ethnic minorities. The Taliban has made these commitments. The Taliban, of course, has not lived up to these commitments. We have taken every opportunity we have in direct engagement with the Taliban, in working with our partners and allies around the world to aggressively advocate for the rights of women and girls, as well as minority groups. Rina Amiri, our special envoy, has been focused on this task since she's been at the department. Tom West, our special representative for Afghanistan, has made this a central point in every one of his engagements, direct and indirect, with the Taliban government. It is core to us, as are the other key priorities that the Taliban, the assurances that the Taliban made to us, as well as to the international community, that Afghanistan does not become a safe haven for terrorists, that the Taliban will engage in national dialogue towards a government that represents all Afghans. The promise of freedom of movement for those who wish to depart the country. And of course, a priority of ours is the safety and ultimately the freedom of Mark Frerichs, who has spent years of his life in custody. All of these are priorities of ours. We continue to raise them through diplomatic channels. It is also core to our humanitarian strategy for Afghanistan, and you referenced this. The United States continues to lead the world in the level of humanitarian funding and assistance that we have provided to Afghanistan, including over the past year. More than $750 million to the people of Afghanistan, much of that specifically earmarked for the country's women and girls, for its minorities. Just last Friday, we announced an additional $150 million funding that is separate from that $750 million. Our Treasury Department has issued general licenses. We have worked with the World Bank on their Afghanistan Reconstruction Trust Fund. We have worked with UN agencies and international financial institutions as well to seek relief for the humanitarian burden that has faced the people of Afghanistan for the past 20 years, but in some ways has been even more acute in recent months. We made this point a year ago that our commitment to the people of Afghanistan in different ways, in different forms, would not end upon the departure of U.S. military forces from Afghanistan. We have been able to make good on that. What we are going to remain focused on is achieving progress, doing all that we can to see to it that this humanitarian support, that these diplomatic steps, that these other tools that we've been able to wield, both in the direction of the Afghan people, but in some cases towards the Taliban itself, measures of accountability that we've imposed on the Taliban itself, to see to it that these steps lead to progress for the people of Afghanistan, including its women, its girls, its minorities. I don't have a specific response to the remarks of the former president.
The State Department spokesman Ned Price getting reporters' questions today in Washington on this anniversary of the U.S. and other Western nations' withdrawal from Afghanistan. U.S. House Republicans putting out a report today accusing President Biden of failing to prepare for that withdrawal and then misleading Americans while it was happening. Congressman Michael McCaul, Republican from Texas, chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, talking about it on Sunday on CBS News' Face the Nation program.
There was a complete lack and a failure to plan. There was no plan, and there was no plan executed. And to your point, even beforehand, I think the State Department probably didn't have the resources it needed to carry out an evacuation of this size and enormity. They had 36 consular officers at HKIA trying to process hundreds of thousands of people. They were overwhelmed, but there are so many mistakes. The biggest one, Margaret, for me, having lived through it, being in the classified space, listening to the intelligence community tell the story about this is going to be imminent. It's going to fall sooner rather than later. The military told us the same thing. And then we went to state, and they paint in the White House a very rosy picture. There's a disconnect between intelligence on the ground and what the White House is doing. I think in this report, this says it all. Like, there's no way we're going to evacuate embassy personnel from helicopters like we did in Vietnam. Yeah. And of course, we know that happened.
Congressman Michael McCaul, Republican from Texas, on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday. More on the House Republican report on the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan on this anniversary and the White House response. We're joined by Katherine Doyle, White House reporter for the Washington Examiner. Thank you very much for being here. A 100-page report from the House Republicans. What are their conclusions?
The House Republicans have concluded that the administration has failed to prepare for the U.S. drawdown and knowingly misled the country as it was underway. They've been asking for transcribed interviews with a number of administration officials, which they say haven't been granted. They've been asking for documents, and they're stepping up their inquiries, and they're really putting pressure on the administration a year after the evacuation to respond to their investigation.
And you write that the White House has come out with a response of their own.
They have. National Security Council spokesperson Adrienne Watson has written a memo that defends Biden's withdrawal. She says that it strengthened national security, contrary to what the Republican report asserts, by freeing up military and intelligence resources that the U.S. can deploy elsewhere. And she says that many of the issues that the administration struggled with during the drawdown were the result of a deal that was put in place by President Biden's Republican predecessor in office, and the failure of that administration to ramp up evacuation preparations for special immigrant visas and other plans for a safer and swift exit.
Well, former President Trump posting today the Afghanistan disaster of exactly 1 year ago was the most embarrassing, incompetent, and humiliating event in the history of the United States. As you just mentioned, the Biden administration pointing their fingers at the former president. Going forward, how much of a political issue, of an issue with the voters might this be?
Foreign policy issues don't typically move the needle that much, but I think this particular issue showed or revealed questions to the public about competency issues that they witnessed during the evacuation. The chaos that ensued, the deadly withdrawal. 13 service members died, as well as others in a bombing outside of the Kabul airport, I think really weighed on Americans who were watching these events play out moment by moment on television throughout the month of August, and will, if they're not an issue in the upcoming elections, will surely be an issue afterwards if Republicans retake control of the House and begin to hold hearings on the drawdown and the administration's handling of it.
We're talking with Katherine Doyle from the Washington Examiner. 1 year after the U.S. withdrawal, what is the state of relations between the U.S. and Afghanistan?
The U.S. and Afghanistan have difficult relations. I mean, right now, they just conducted a strike killing the leader of Al-Qaeda inside downtown Kabul, which the administration says is testament to their assertion that the U.S. can conduct over-the-horizon strikes and take out important targets from a distance. But the strike also brings up the issue that a senior leader of Al-Qaeda was living freely in a city run by the Taliban, and this is after an agreement that the U.S. had struck during the Trump administration that the Taliban would not have relations with Al-Qaeda. So it calls into question the way that the U.S. can continue to deal with a government that is flouting the premise of an original agreement.
Katherine Doyle is White House reporter for the Washington Examiner. Find her stories at WashingtonExaminer.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Congressman Peter Meijer, Republican from Michigan, was an intelligence advisor in the U.S. Army Reserve deployed to Iraq a decade ago, and he has been critical over the past year of President Biden's handling of withdrawal from Afghanistan. Today, on the anniversary, he says the U.S. must now look to make sure that the current Taliban government in that country is at least stable and that it doesn't become a safe haven for terrorist organizations again. Congressman Meijer spoke at CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
I'm a big believer that the United States cannot afford the same decent interval that we had in Vietnam, that the question of engagement, the question of choosing who we talk to and where and how we're not in a position to put ego first. We're not in a position to be acting on a basis of emotion. We need to be focused on strategic, long-term national interests. We need to be focused on great power competition. We need to be focused on understanding and never forgetting why, again, we went into Afghanistan in the first place. We have a vested interest today in making sure that Afghanistan does not collapse, that there is not an overwhelming humanitarian catastrophe that will only empower those who seek to do the West harm. We have that on the one hand, but then we also have a strong desire, in my view, to make sure that Afghanistan does not return to the fold of actors who are fundamentally unaligned or opposed to the strength of the West. I think Afghanistan today is caught in a very interesting conundrum. They have obviously a long-standing, among the Taliban and the Haqqani network, they have a long-standing affinity and support network in Pakistan. They also have ties to the Chinese and Russian governments. But among the leadership, there is an interest, at least expressed, and I cannot claim the degree of sincerity, but there is a degree of interest in engaging with the West and in taking on more of a Saudi model and getting to the point where the West recognizes that Afghanistan will not be a perfect Jeffersonian democracy tomorrow, but that there's a very big difference and distinction between that and what we currently have. And I think that is really important for us to focus on, and that is really important for us to remember at the end of the day. It's very easy to fall victim to delusions of grandeur, of the idea that there's some wonderful Panjshiri rebellion that's going to come from beneath and sweep into Kabul. I think that is a fiction.
Congressman Peter Meijer, a Republican from Michigan, offering some remarks that were pre-recorded at today's event hosted by CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, on the anniversary of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. A foreign ministry spokesman in Iran denying that Iran had anything to do with Friday's stabbing attack on author Salman Rushdie at a literary festival in New York. A spokesman saying, by insulting the sacred matters of Islam and crossing the red lines of more than 1.5 billion Muslims and all followers of the divine religion, Salman Rushdie has exposed himself to the anger and rage of the people. In this attack, we do not consider anyone other than Salman Rushdie and his supporters worthy of blame and even condemnation. Salman Rushdie is an Indian-born British writer. After he published his book, The Satanic Verses, back in 1989, Iran's leader at the time, Ayatollah Khomeini, issued a religious ruling, a fatwa, putting a bounty on his head. We return to the U.S. State Department in Washington. A question to the spokesman, Ned Price.
The Iranian Foreign Ministry said that while they claim they have no involvement in this attack, that it is Salman Rushdie and his supporters who are to be blamed because of the principles they espouse. Do you have a reaction?
I do.
Do you have a reaction to the Iranian government blaming the victim here, Salman Rushdie, for this attack?
I do. It's despicable. It's disgusting. We condemn it. The Secretary yesterday, in his statement, while noting that the investigation is ongoing, made the point that Salman Rushdie has been under threat for decades now. And it is no secret that the Iranian regime has been central to the threats against his life over the course of years now. We have heard Iranian officials seek to incite to violence over the years, of course, with the initial fatwa, but even more recently with the gloating that has taken place in the aftermath of this attack on his life. This is something that is absolutely outrageous, it's despicable, and we want it to be very clear that it is not something that we can tolerate.
Well, can I just follow up? While this, more broadly, while this may well be a lone actor, what is the concern about others being supported, incited, encouraged by the rhetoric that comes out of Tehran?
That's always the concern. It is the concern and it has been the concern when it comes to specific individuals like Salman Rushdie. But of course, this language that has really amounted to incitement to violence has had a much broader and wider target set than one individual. The number of statements that emanate from Iran towards the entire country of Israel, towards the Jewish people, towards any number of individuals, groups that the Iranian regime, for whatever reason, opposes. This is something that, of course, is not new to Iran, but it is something that we condemn at every turn.
U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price at his briefing. Salman Rushdie is 75 years old. He is still recovering in the hospital. His agent said he's on the road to recovery. His son says that the injuries from the stabbings are life-changing. A suspect, a 24-year-old New Jersey resident, Hadi Matar, has been arrested and charged and has pleaded not guilty, according to reports. This from Reuters. China's military said it carried out more exercises near Taiwan on Monday as a group of U.S. lawmakers visited the Chinese-claimed island and met President Tsai Ing-wen, who said her government was committed to maintaining stability. The article goes on. The 5 U.S. lawmakers, led by Senator Ed Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, arrived in Taipei on an unannounced visit late on Sunday, the second high-level group to visit following that of U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi in early August, which set off several days of Chinese war games. Both the president of Taiwan and Senator Ed Markey made some public statements during their meeting.
At this critical time, we are receiving friends from afar who are taking concrete action to express their friendship with Taiwan. On behalf of all the people of Taiwan, I would like to thank all of you for being longtime supporters of Taiwan in the U.S. Congress. You are all extremely important friends of Taiwan.
At this moment of uncertainty, we must do everything we can to maintain peace and stability for Taiwan. We have a moral obligation to do everything we can to prevent an unnecessary conflict. And Taiwan has demonstrated incredible restraint and discretion during challenging times.
Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, meeting the president of Taiwan in Taipei. Those clips coming from a news report from Formosa TV English News. The Chinese ambassador to the United Nations, Zhang Jun, asked about this latest U.S. Congressional delegation visit to Taiwan. He was asked outside a meeting of the UN Security Council in New York City. China is chairing the Security Council for this month.
Ambassador, another visit from members of the Congress to Taiwan, while the U.S. officials still insist they believe on one China policy. Any comment about that?
They should draw a lesson from the visit of Speaker Pelosi, and they should understand that they should stop going further down the wrong direction. And the whole world is seeing clearly who is provoking, who is changing the status quo, and who is trying to create troubles in that part of the world. And for China, definitely, we will continue to do whatever we can to defend our sovereignty and territorial integrity. And it shows also clearly that the countermeasures we have taken in responsive to such provocative acts are justified, are legitimate.
Zhang Jun is China's ambassador to the United Nations, talking with reporters after a UN Security Council meeting today in New York City. Senator Ed Markey chairs the Foreign Relations Subcommittee on East Asia, the Pacific, and International Cybersecurity Policy. Joining him on this trip, Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of California and Alan Lowenthal of California, also Don Beyer of Virginia, and Republican member of Congress Amara Radewagen of American Samoa. More from the Reuters article. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan infuriated China, which responded with test launches of ballistic missiles over Taipei for the first time and ditching some lines of dialogue with Washington, including theater military talks and on climate change. However, this trip was much more low-key than Pelosi's, with Tsai's meeting with the lawmakers not carried live on her social media pages, which is the general practice when high-level foreign guests come. That from Reuters. An article from CNN, standing in front of the historic Red Fort in Delhi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday pledged to transform India into a developed country in the next 25 years. He said the way the world is seeing India is changing. There is hope from India, and the reason is the skills of 1.3 billion Indians. The diversity of India is our strength. Being the mother of democracy gives India the inherent power to scale new heights. Modi's words came as millions celebrated 75 years of Indian independence since the stroke of midnight on August 15, 1947, that ended nearly 200 years of British colonial rule. That from CNN. Of course, it was a partition in 1947, so this is also Independence Day for Pakistan. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken back in Washington, D.C. after a trip to several African countries, meeting today with the African Diaspora Youth and Exchange alumni.
This is evidence that for us, sub-Saharan Africa is a major force for the future. And it's the very numbers that Irv cited that go to the heart of this. The fact that, as he said, in the next couple of years, virtually half the population will be under the age of 25. And by 2050, 1 in 4 people on this planet from Africa. That is the definition of the future. And we have a profound stake in trying to get that shared future right. One of the opportunities that I had during the trip was to lay out our strategy for sub-Saharan Africa. And we tried to focus on a simple proposition. For us now, this is not about what we do for Africa, it's what we do with Africa. And it comes down to I think, a simple, powerful recognition. There is not a single issue that is really having an effect on the lives of our people and on Africans, whether it is COVID that we've all been grappling with and global health more broadly, whether it's climate change, whether it's the impact of emerging technologies on all of our lives. Not a single one of these issues can we effectively address alone. We have to find ways to cooperate. We have to find ways to coordinate. We have to find ways to do more with other countries. And precisely because Africa represents so much of the future, as well as the present, it's in our interest to find ways to deepen our cooperation.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken with the African Diaspora Youth and Exchange alumni at the State Department in Washington, D.C. today. Secretary just finishing up a trip that began in Cambodia and the Philippines, and then there were stops in South Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Rwanda. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Here are some of the live programs on Tuesday on C-SPAN Radio. At noon Eastern, a discussion of Afghanistan 1 year under Taliban rule. It's hosted by the Cato Institute in Washington. Then at 2 p.m. Eastern, Dr. Ashish Jha, White House COVID-19 Response Coordinator, speaks at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. That's live Tuesday on C-SPAN Radio. You can listen on the C-SPAN Now mobile app or ask your smart speaker to play C-SPAN Radio.
Welcome back to Washington Today, which you can get as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile video app and wherever you get your podcasts. Former President Donald Trump, writes Fox News, said he will do whatever he can to help the country after the FBI's raid of his Mar-a-Lago home last week, telling Fox News Digital that the temperature has to be brought down, while stressing that the American people are not going to stand for another scam. Former President Trump goes on, quoted, "The country is in a very dangerous position. There is tremendous anger like we've never seen before all over the scams, and this new one, years of scams and witch hunts, and now this." Following the FBI's execution of the search warrant at former President Trump's home, Department of Homeland Security and Federal Bureau of Investigation did send bulletins to law enforcement agencies warning of increased threats. Congressman Andy Biggs, Republican from Arizona, interviewed today by Newsmax about the FBI's search of former President Trump's home and those threats.
I do believe that the American people should not make threats of violence toward the FBI, and I basically criticize that, and I say, don't do that. That's not what you should be doing. But the First Amendment allows us to provide critique, especially for political purposes. And I'm politically speaking out saying, look, the FBI has lost the trust of the American people. And it's lost it because of its abuse of the American people. That doesn't mean we take arms to the street or threaten police or the FBI. What it means is we in Congress have got to oversee them, and we've got to take action to hold them responsible. And those who continue to perpetuate these falsities and this abuse of American people, we have to hold them according to the process that we have in check and accountable. Not for violence. Certainly you can protest, that's legitimate First Amendment activity, but not threatening and not violence for sure.
Do you think that those affidavits would be unsealed, or the affidavit would be unsealed?
The affidavit should be unsealed. If it was unsealed, that might assuage some of the concern we have here. But don't forget, we have seen affidavits fudged, and we had one FBI agent go to be criminally prosecuted for fudging a FISA warrant application. So these affidavits in and of themselves aren't going to solve much, but what's going to solve this is the stopping of the use of power to abuse political opponents. And that's what we've seen here time and time again, Sean.
Congressman Andy Biggs, Republican from Arizona, on Newsmax. Later in the day, this from the Washington Post. The Justice Department asked the judge Monday to keep sealed the sworn affidavit underpinning last week's extraordinary FBI search of former President Donald Trump's Florida residence, a document believed to hold key details about the government's investigation into the potential mishandling of classified materials. Monday's court filing was made in response to requests from multiple media outlets, including the Washington Post, seeking the affidavit's public release. And the article also has this: Justice Department argued that releasing the affidavit could hamper its investigation and potentially harm those involved. A story from the Concord Monitor in New Hampshire. One of the biggest names in the Republican Party and a rising star in the GOP head to New Hampshire in the coming days, with less than 3 months to go till the starting gun in the next race for the White House. The publicly stated mission of these trips by former Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas is to help fellow Republicans running in November's midterm elections, when the GOP aims to win back majorities in the U.S. House and Senate. However, the visits to the first-in-the-nation presidential primary state will inevitably spark some 2024 speculation. Well, C-SPAN will be covering these events in New Hampshire with Mike Pence and Tom Cotton this week. Today, the Democratic National Committee held a virtual news conference, as the DNC puts it, to call Tom Cotton and Mike Pence out for their dangerous, extreme agenda ahead of their visits. But all the questions from reporters were about former President Trump. Here's part of the briefing. The two briefers are New Hampshire State Senate Democratic leader Donna Soucy and DNC Deputy Executive Director Roger Lau.
This is the first visit since the Mar-a-Lago raid, and I wanted to ask Senator Soucy whether she thought people like Senator Cotton and Vice President Pence are going to have difficulty getting traction here in New Hampshire, as Republicans, as you know, seem to be obsessed with either coming to Trump's defense or trying to run away. I wonder your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the Republican field is just so out of step with New Hampshire voters. I mean, I think the reason they're failing to get traction anywhere is because their policies just aren't representative of what the state is, whether it's Tom Cotton or Mike Pence. I mean, voters, I think, are shaking their heads, wondering why this, really, really extreme and focus on not the day-to-day issues that are impacting Granite Staters, but they're focused instead on this ideology that isn't going to benefit the lives of anyone here. So yeah, they might have trouble getting traction, but I don't think Mar-a-Lago or anything else has to do with it. I think it's the positions that they hold.
Great. Thank you for that. Tom, let's go to Tom next.
Hey guys, thank you very much for doing this. Kind of in the same vein as Kevin's question, I just wanted to ask, given all that we've seen, especially over the past week with the classified documents taken, from the former president's abode in Florida, do you think it's fair to call the Pence and Cotton in particular the most extreme versions of Republicans and MAGA, given all that we've witnessed?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll take a crack at this. I mean, this is all on the Republicans, and it's all on Mike Pence and Tom Cotton. It's their choice to define their party and their role in it. It's their choice of who they want to promote and the issues that they defend, who they want to elect, and and the fact that many of them, including supporters of theirs, still support President Trump in a very extreme agenda, and many of them are still relitigating 2020, still claiming that the Republicans won the election. And they're supporting candidates who share that same view. If they want to blame anyone, they need to take a deep look in the mirror, all of them, and look at each of the Republicans who voted not to certify the election, the Republicans who voted not to impeach Trump for leading an insurrection. Their party is extreme. I mean, the Democrats running our own party, we're doing passing historic legislation, and meanwhile these guys are out of touch with the mainstream. Their party has been hijacked clearly, and unless they want to stand up to their own extremists in their own party, and as maybe they should, I don't think they can point to anyone else.
Roger Lau is the Democratic National Committee Deputy Executive Director on a Zoom call along with New Hampshire State Senate Democratic Leader Donna Soucy ahead of those events this week by Senator Tom Cotton, Republican from Arkansas, and former Vice President Mike Pence. And again, we'll be covering those events with those two Republicans on the C-SPAN networks. A federal judge says that Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, must testify before a special grand jury in Atlanta next week investigating whether former President Trump and his allies broke any laws while trying to overturn the 2020 presidential election loss in that state. Senator Graham, in a statement, says that he will appeal. He writes, the Constitution's speech or debate clause prevents a local official from questioning a senator about how that senator did his job. Here, Senator Graham was doing his due diligence before the Electoral Count Act certification vote, where he voted to certify the election, although the district court acknowledged that speech or debate may protect some of Senator Graham's activities. She nevertheless ignored the constitutional text and binding Supreme Court precedent, so Senator Graham plans to appeal the 11th Circuit. President Joe Biden did not have any public events today as he and his family continue their vacation on Kiowa Island off the coast of South Carolina, though a video of him riding his bike on the beach was posted by reporters. Reporters shouting some questions at him, but he did not answer. The president did post a video himself on his official Twitter account at POTUS on the anniversary of Social Security being signed into law. That was officially Sunday. President presenting a cake that reads, "Happy birthday, Social Security."
You know, it's Social Security's birthday, and I think we should celebrate. Look, if you know me, you know I think that rebuilding the middle class is the moral obligation of our time. Social Security allows for our seniors to retire with dignity, and me and my Democratic friends on the Hill are trying to protect it and expand it. In fact, our strong employment recovery from American Rescue Plan means Social Security is going to pay for benefits for even longer than it was originally projected. And there's more we want to do. But here's what's crazy. The Republicans on the Hill, they want to put it on the chopping block. Every 5 years it would come up to reconsideration whether it continues or not. Think about that. Let me ask you, have you ever seen the Republicans in Capitol Hill do anything to protect or increase or to benefit Social Security? So here's the deal. With Democrats in Congress, you get stronger Social Security because you paid for it and you deserve it. With Republicans in Congress, it's probably going to get sliced. So happy birthday, Social Security. Here's to keeping you healthy.
President Joe Biden posting that video. Social Security signed in 1935, August 14th, yesterday. White House says that President Biden will be returning from vacation in South Carolina to Washington on Tuesday to sign into law that $740 billion bill that passed Congress last week, the budget reconciliation package that deals with health care insurance affordability, lowering prescription drug costs, addressing climate change, and increasing taxes on large corporations. They'll be signing it on Tuesday. Wall Street today, the Dow up 151, NASDAQ up 80, S&P up 16. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word at c-span.org/connect to get Washington's top stories sent to you every day. Hope you have a good night.